Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Conversations with Annie and Kate. Today our guest is Annalie Killian, and Annalie says that her life purpose is all about connecting smart thinkers and doers to wicked challenges for insights and solutions to make the world a better place. She, when I met her, was the catalyst for magic at a financial services organisation in Sydney, Australia. But now she's based in New York. She has done really amazing things in her career. She's an Aspen Institute First Movers Fellow. She's a graduate of the Singularity University Executive Program. She's an advisor to a number of international accelerators and startups. And she's the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Sparks and Honey. And she has an immense network of game changers and movers and shakers. Welcome, Annalie. Hi, Annie.
Hi. Lovely to see you.
So nice to meet you, Annalie. What an incredible resume. And what I love about it as well is it's sort of this collection of things rather than a linear, sort of career path. So I'm really fascinated to talk to you about all of that.
Yes. If you didn't sort of see my body, you would swear I was a trapeze artist. I sort of see career as a trapeze act.
Love it.
Totally. So what are we drinking? I've got tea in my Chairman Meow mug, which...
What's got a tea, though?
It's English breakfast.
Good work. I'm still on the lemon and ginger tea with extra lemon from my lemon trees outside in my Harry Potter Marauders map mug, which really the reason why I love this is it's massive, so you can fit a lot of tea into it. There we go. Oh, I don't know. That seems to be...
The green screen just made it look like you're sipping a palm tree.
Look, it's magic. It's actually magic. There you go. How about you, Annalie? What are you drinking?
Well, I just had a 2 hours financial planning session with my financial advisor back in Sydney, and I managed to kill 2 Aperol spritzes, and now I'm out of Aperol, and I'm just going to have the Prosecco by itself, so cheers.
Cheers. Like your style.
We need to clarify, it's nighttime where Annalie is in New York, and...
It's like 9 o'clock. Yeah, it's 9 o'clock.
All right, Annie, do you want to go with your first question?
I do, and if it's okay, I'm just going to ask you, given that we're in such an unusual time with COVID and lots of other societal issues going on out there, I just wanted to ask you, Annalie, how you approach self-care. What do you do to take care of yourself?
Oh, I thought I deliberately took that question off because I don't practice self-care.
Oh, well, that's interesting though. So what, is there any reason why you don't?
I guess self-care is all relative, isn't it? I mean, it's like as the dictionary, I suppose the conventional wisdom is that you need to sleep 8 hours. Well, I have never slept 8 hours in my entire life. And now is like really bad for that because just not enough natural sunlight. Vitamin D is a problem. Staying indoors, sitting in front of a screen, really long hours. And when you were finished with work, then you go on a screen to socialize and maintain your relationships. And so I spend, my 2 daughters are in Europe. My mom is in Cape Town. She's just been diagnosed with rare cancer at 87. So that's kind of draining. And my ex-husband is still having problems in Sydney. And then my friends are all over the world. So I kind of like, I'm around the clock online. So I guess I practice self-care by maintaining relationships and being closely connected with the people that I love. And if that means that I spend a lot of time online and not in bed sleeping, then so be it. That keeps me sane.
Yeah, it's an interesting. So I'm originally from the UK, moved here to Australia 7 years ago, and my friend network is all distributed around the world as well. And in some ways, it is harder because you've got so many time zones to navigate with. But it also does mean that if you are having a random sleepless night, someone somewhere in the world is awake, and you can have a chat with them, which is just marvelous.
Oh, I know. I have posted like it's 3:00 in the morning and I can't sleep. And people kind of go, what, you too? It's a thing. I think it's a thing.
There's kind of a pandemic sleeplessness too that seems to be happening, and I suspect that's due to rising anxiety levels.
Yeah, I think it's that, but I think our biorhythms are also thrown out a little bit. I mean, I've never been an early sleeper, and I don't wear this as a badge of pride. I have at times in my life tried to discipline myself, go to bed at 10 o'clock, and then I might fall asleep, but like literally at midnight, I'm wide awake, and then it's wide awake till 4 a.m. So I now tend to go to bed when I'm exhausted. Like I get into bed around 11 midnight, and then I might be up until 1:30 doing stuff. But then I sleep until 9 o'clock. So that's okay.
Yep, that's pretty much my schedule too. And, I hate when you see all of these tips for successful entrepreneurs and they all get up at 5 a.m. and do yoga and run 10 kilometers and stuff. I just think that's anathema to me. I do not want to do that.
I know, but I mean, isn't that what the point of diversity is? Like, people make out like there's just one recipe for happiness and for success. And I mean, we know this is not true. We know this isn't true. So some people peak late at night. I peak late at night.
Yep. And, I'm a late starter for things that have due dates. I can't start till the day before. So.
Oh, I love a deadline to focus the mind.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, the other thing is if you leave it till the last minute, I typically find stuff that is really important to add into whatever it is I'm doing, whether it's a piece of research or a person I've just spoken to. So if I did all the work earlier, I'd only have to do it again. And oftentimes I found as well is on some deadlines, leaving it till the last minute means that sometimes you end up not wasting any work as well, because sometimes deadlines move or priorities change. So yeah, I'm definitely a last minute chancer as well.
Well, here's what I think about it is I tend to start my thinking early. And so I would like literally sort of prepare my mind. So I'm writing an article at the moment, and I know I'm only going to be handing it in furiously writing it in the last, weekend or something. But I started really early on with what do I want to communicate? What are the key points? And then, I did a little bit of research around that. The big challenge is not to overthink it, because you can then get yourself into a tailspin and say, oh my God, this is bigger than Ben-Hur, I can't finish it. So the fact, but I find that it's like, it's filtering your thoughts, this long process. And then by the time that you get down to do the final writing, it's very crystal clear and it flows easily.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an interesting thing, because that leads into my question, which is about some books that you might recommend. What ones would you recommend, Annalie?
Oh, geez. Some of the things that sort of stay with me are things that I think became pivotal in my life in terms of really just something that I can kind of anchor around. One very big life change that I made was when I read a book by M. Scott Peck long time ago, was The Road Less Traveled. And what was really interesting for me about that was probably the first self-help book that I ever read. And it was so dense, and I would read 2 or 3 pages and go, oh my God, let me read that again. What? And it was because I think it was very relevant to that. The reason why I picked up that book was that I had a lot of questions and difficult decisions to face. It had to do with my marriage and where I was going to go, and confronting my values and thinking about my children and my family and my whole everything. So that's a perennial favorite. One of the big insights from that book was, around tough love. That is a hard one, and it was really something that helped me understand a lot of things about myself. Second one was something that I believe is like when you discover something like that, it's like the keys to the universe. And it was a book called Tiny Habits by Professor B.J. Fogg from Stanford University. And it's really like taking his model for how you shape behavior and then apply that in a personal capacity. And so through Tiny Habits, I picked up, the sort of like ways in which to maintain change in my life. And so that helped me with weight loss. It's helped me with, learning to journal. It's helped me with time management. Hasn't helped me with sleep yet, but that's just because I think I give in to the impulse of instant gratification there. And then I'm reading something right now that is a book that is about to come out. It's by one of the speakers that I had at Amplify Festival a few times in Australia. He's a musician originally by profession. His name is David Price. So David Price was a career musician, and then he ended up in education, and then he became an innovator in education, and most recently is an author around emerging trends and societal shifts. And what I love about this book, The Power of Us, which is coming out on the 28th of August, is that David has written a business book, but it's literally like you and I are having a conversation. It's like you're at a dinner party and this is the conversation. And so that's how it reads. And I just love it so much. And I think that what is so unique about it is because David, most part of his, early career was as a musician, he sees things in a very different way. And I think he sees the harmonizing in the noise that allows him to see it before other people do. And he makes it so clear and so compelling. So I do recommend that book, The Power of Us. It's really about how collaboration is happening to solve big challenges and correct social ills and wrongs through values-driven society.
You're in New York now. What's it like there?
I love New York. That's why I came here. It's been a dream since I was a teenager to live and work in New York, and I still love it. I love it really, probably even more now, despite the fact that the city is very damaged. But it's the spirit of New Yorkers that makes the city so unique. So it's without fail, people everywhere, they obey the mask rule. They really get that our actions are there to protect each other, and together we're better than to, that's kind of the New York way. And I love the city for that reason. People here have gone out of their way to try and keep the restaurants going. So a lot of, we've been maintaining, I'm not a particularly an order in kind of a person. I'm a go out person, but we decided that it's our moral duty as citizens to make sure that these people have jobs. So we'd order in rather than prepare it ourselves. And people tip very generously and so on. It's just wonderful. So I still love it, but the city is very damaged.
You've traveled a lot with your role, and also you're originally from South Africa. You've lived here in Australia. You've lived in the US. Was that something that's always been part of your kind of drive, the travel, the wanting to see new places?
I guess so. I don't know people say that the Sagittarians are the wandering star, like itchy feet Sagittarians. And maybe if there was anything in the sort of star signs, then I'm definitely got a good dose of that. But I think it's also inherently typical for curious people. So I have a very curious mind, and I like to, I get, I don't know, I just like to explore. So if you want to kill me, give me routine. So I don't do well with routine, and that's one of the reasons why I love my current job so much, because there's not so much routine in it. But my grandmother, if she was still alive, would tell you that when I was, yay high, and she would read me stories about Heidi and Little Red Riding Hood and, these stories, I would always say, like, okay, so where is their house? Because I don't see mountains. And this was growing up in Johannesburg. And if we went on a drive in the car on a Sunday afternoon, as you used to do for entertainment in those days, we'd drive maybe past a small forest, and I'd say, oh, is this where Little Red Riding Hood lives, or whatever. But the moment that my grandma explained to me that, no, there is this place called Switzerland, and it's not in South Africa, and it's this place where there's this high mountains where Heidi lives, I just knew when I was 3 years old, okay, I got to go there. And so many of these things became just part of the ambition. I had my first flight. Now, this is not something funny for millennials. My kids flew when they were days old, but I'm 58, and I had my first flight when I was 6 years old. And then I went every 2 years flying somewhere, and that was very unheard of for my generation. And people used to say to me, like, so how do you do it? I said, well, I would just find out where we've got a distant relative and then make myself invited there. Just say to my parents, no, I've got to go and visit these people. So that's what I did. So I've been traveling a lot since I was little and be very inventive about it.
Is that why you did the high school exchange? You did a high school exchange in Australia, didn't you?
Yes, Rotary Youth Exchange. So I went to Australia for a year. That was my first international trip. And then I got back to back to South Africa, and I was like, couldn't wait to have more of it. And so I enrolled at university, and realized I was going to be a pauper for a long time and not have enough money to travel. And so I would sort of like go to the travel agencies. Remember those days we had travel agencies and they'd have all these brochures, and I would sort of like take one from each country, and I'd go back home and I'd be flicking through these brochures, and then I stumbled upon the fine print, and one of them was a magazine called Trek America. And it was sort of like camping trips for the 18 to 35-year-olds. And going, geez, I'd really like to go and do this sort of coast-to-coast thing across America. And then I read that if you got 15 people, and you filled a little bus, the 16th person travels. No, sorry, it was 13. If you got 13 people, the 14th person travels for free. So I thought, wow, I'm at a university. There's a lot of young people here. They must have money, because otherwise they wouldn't be at university. I'll just create a tour. I'll go and see if I can fill a bus. And so I filled 3 buses. And so all of us, off we went to America. And what the irony was, when the student dean found out, he said, well, you can't advertise on campus because, their parents would think it's an officially sanctioned university tour. So I'm going to have to forbid you from communicating on campus unless you take a faculty member to be a chaperone. I mean, okay, fine. So there goes 2 free seats, because he then wanted to bring his wife, and I had planned on cashing in and using that as pocket money. So I then had to, compromise and take this guy and his wife on the tour, but then we couldn't put all 3 of the buses in the same direction. So I worked out that the bus that I would go on would be with all the fun people, and that'll be the party bus. And it went from west to east coast, and the other two went from east to west, and we sort of met up in the middle, somewhere on the New Mexico border. And when we met there, I kind of came to hear that this faculty member was paying nightly visits to some of the girls' tents. So the chaperone was actually wolf in sheep's clothing. So I sort of thought afterwards, I should go back to that student dean and say, pay up, mate. I have some blackmail here, but I didn't do that. But it was just like so ironic, isn't it? Like, I'm forced into this situation to take a faculty member as chaperone, and then he couldn't keep his underwear on.
So goes the world.
Yeah. Nothing's changed.
Nothing has changed, yes. And his wife's fast asleep in her own tent.
Oh, that makes my blood boil.
Yeah.
But it was a brush with realpolitik really early in your life, wasn't it?
Yeah. Kind of event, like you learn, I mean, like sexual harassment and so on today, I know that it's a very fraught topic, but I worked as a waitress from a very young age in high school, and I mean, like, I could tell you so many sexual harassment stories. Just everybody, like all the people my age, I'm sure all of you have stories like that to tell. So, it's a rife thing.
It's actually been a recurring theme that, the cognitive load on women because of that, am I dressing provocatively? Will I be inviting this? Is quite substantial. Sorry, Annie, you were saying?
I was just going to say the thing that always jumps out for me, particularly when I speak to guys who say, well, I've never done that. You go, I completely believe you, because I think that quite a lot of, the guys that we associate with in startup land, in innovation world, they're good people. But the piece that I always remind them of is every single woman has a story. So even though you might not have been part of the, kind of the reason why, every single woman, particularly women in tech and women in, kind of enterprise or corporate businesses, we all have a story. And I find that part is just, it seems to be the thing that seems to sort of switch most of the men's brains around for me, which is, I get that it wasn't you, not all men, hashtag, but every woman has a story without.
So which one of your friends, question, was doing that?
Sorry, say that again.
Which one of their friends was doing it? If they weren't doing it, who among their friends was, and why didn't they stop it? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I think that's the point, is that many of them were aware that that sort of thing goes on, but, they don't get involved.
Yeah. I'm interested to talk about your Amplify years. So tell us about Amplify.
Oh, wow, that was such a fun time. So I was working at AMP at the time, and I was asked to help build a culture of innovation, working with the CIO at the time. And it was during one of those many tumultuous years at AMP. This particular time was literally probably around about 2002, 2003. But was before the CEO got sacked. That time it was Paul Batchelor, and so we were working with a group to sort of say, okay, so how would the company continue to innovate, et cetera, et cetera. It was very early days on innovation, and my boss, who was the CIO, was part of this leadership group to work out how to build a culture of innovation, and made a presentation. And at the time, this presentation was really ill-timed because the company was in so much financial distress. And so the the rest of the management team said, no bloody way, you know, like we're bleeding. And so nothing kind of came of it. And then shortly thereafter, the CIO turned around and said to me, well, if the whole company doesn't want to go on this journey, you know, I want to invest in this for the IT community. And I want you to lead innovation. And it was kind of interesting because in those days, we're talking 2003, nobody was, you know, innovating per se. It wasn't I remember doing a Google search on innovation, and there was like 3,000 terms came up on the word innovation, 3,000 search results. And, you know, today it would be many, many more. But as I embarked on this journey, I found, oh my God, you know, what I think we're really missing here is a culture of learning and a culture of curiosity, because when people are naturally curious and they sort of start looking for things and they're open-minded and they're constantly learning, it's kind of inevitable that most people have the ability to be innovative. But I found that the company was not a learning culture. And so I decided that how can I fix that when I didn't have much budget? I didn't have a corporate mandate to bring the whole company on board. I only had a mandate for the IT community. So I learned from literally studying how ecosystems change. So I paid a lot of attention to creative emergence in ecosystems to say, well, what could I learn from that and then bring into this ecosystem, you know, from a design principle perspective? And I came to the conclusion that I had to build curiosity as a groundswell movement and get people to be exposed and excited about new things and learning and new insights. And so that's how Amplify was founded. One of the other things that I've never shared with people was that at the start, I had a really strong vision for it. Right in the very beginning is I thought the business that we were in, AMP's business, was to help people procure their future, you know, financially. So really at the bottom line was company would say, hand your money to us so that we can safeguard it and grow it for you, so that when you're in your old age and you need it, you know, we can hand you a nice lump sum of money back, or, you know, that you'll have something for your retirement. So it was like, trust us to secure the future for you. And then I thought, well, if we are not investing in understanding this future, then how can we actually deliver on this promise? So I thought, well, the best piece of that would be if we became future hunters. And we could say as a brand that it's really, really important that we need to anticipate the future and build an anticipatory culture so that we can be the very best managers of people's money, so that we can deliver on the brand promise. So that was the whole idea of investing in a festival of learning that was very much future focused around like emerging technologies, emerging shifts in consumer behaviors, new patterns, new innovations, that sort of thing. And then I created an opportunity to invite everybody in the whole company to embark on this kind of learning adventure. It wasn't exclusive. It wasn't just for the anointed few, because that's the learning model of most organizations, is that, you know, there's just the crown princes and princesses that get to go off and do some exotic program, and the rest of the people have to make do with some boring online class or something. And so I wanted to excite people with the possibilities that learning could unlock.
So you brought in some really amazing names, like BJ Fogg was one of the people. You know, there's a list of luminaries. So you created this the event in Sydney that was open to everyone in the organisation.
Yeah, and then eventually we grew it to say that, I mean, one of the guiding principles of the design was always openness. And so I basically, from the very beginning, wanted to have an open event that we could invite our partners, our customers, our suppliers, and the general public, anybody who wanted to learn. This was an open door for learning together, because I think the togetherness and the openness drove a lot of value in itself. I remember in some of the sessions, particularly when we started opening it up to the public, best questions at the end of each session, because we sort of designed the sessions that it was like a kind of a 20-minute talk by the expert and then a facilitated conversation with somebody interviewing the expert for another 15 minutes, and then open questions to the floor. So the audience kind of got about half of the time and the speaker got about half of the time. But the best questions came from the floor and often from people from the outside. And the learning was usually embedded through those questions. The questions were great.
So I've seen on your wonderful, sort of career profile, you talk a lot about some of the board positions you hold, and I saw one of them was the NYC Innovation Collective. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that, because you're seeing so many startups with founders who are all sort of inspired to solve a problem in some way, shape, or form in a new crazy way. That must be really interesting to obviously see lots of ideas coming through. But how did that role come across for you?
So that was an ambassadorial role, to be a sort of a bridge between the business community and the startup communities. The New York City Innovation Collective is it's like an umbrella body for the accelerators in New York. They were I'm no longer on the board, but they were around, about 125 accelerators who were members. And the whole idea of the umbrella body was to say, how do we make the process of building incubators and accelerators consistent, so that this becomes a capability that we could scale across the city? Because certain accelerators were doing it well, but we wanted to replicate that, whether it was the food industry or the space industry or the data industry, etc. There were specialized accelerators. There's a fashion accelerator. There's all sorts of accelerators. How could they learn from each other and then, replicate success at scale? And I think that was a very interesting model in terms of thinking about building capacity for making your city an innovation city.
Very cool. And there's having worked in lots of different cities around the world, does New York have something that perhaps other places in the world don't have when it comes to innovation?
Everything I say now is obviously pre-COVID.
Sure.
I think that the magic of New York was that it's an icon. It's a place that, for its sheer size and gravity, it attracts the smartest, and it's a concentration of smart people as well as money. And then it's got this sort of like iconic cult status that, if you can make it in New York, you can kind of make it anywhere. And that in itself means it's aspirational. People are drawn to the city. So since I moved here 5 years ago, I would say, I don't have to go anywhere else because everybody is eventually coming to New York. So it's just a hotbed because of its size and its economic activity across a wide range of sectors where, you know, it's got some of the very best. It's got the best of music, the best of theater, the best of financials, I suppose, Wall Street, and then it attracts talent.
Mm-hmm.
And so innovators want to be where talent is. And so all of this is pre-COVID. So it's interesting to sort of see what develops now, because I think eventually cities can become too expensive. And then eventually they force people and startups in particular to go somewhere else. But New York's kind of a place where the money is attracted to, and then when the money is there, other things come.
How do you think that COVID could potentially change not just New York, but the world? Do you think that it could lend itself to creating a new sort of community consciousness for change? Like that last book that you mentioned?
Yes. I mean, I do think that the very fact that there are something like 85 vaccines being developed at breakneck speed because of open collaboration is one example of that people are literally just banding together to make the world better for everybody else by finding, you know, solution to this problem. I saw when there was PPE shortages, do you know, the very first moment that I knew there was going to be a big problem was, I think, the morning of the 8th of February, very, very early on. It was a Sunday morning. I woke up to a Facebook post from one of our advisory board members who was, you know, she's got a lot of interests in China. And she posted that, can anybody help her find PPE? She needs 20,000 protective clothing suits and surgical masks to send to China. There is a cash donor who will charter a plane and send it out. We just need to try and get hold of it. And because I'm well connected and I have friends in high places, I thought, I'm going to jump on this, because the more we can help China to get on top of this problem, the better the world will be off. The better off the world will be. So what became apparent then was that even in the US, there wasn't any stock available, because turned out the stock all came from China. And I'm talking to the very, very highest levels of government, so that we could not unlock supplies. And this was, you know, a month to 6 weeks before it really hit America. And so that was an eye-opener. But to come back to the story of collaboration is how I saw people, of course there was a lot of gouging and corruption. We've seen that, like some people have suddenly put the price up, some people just bought for themselves, they didn't want to share. I mean, it even happened with, at a federal government level here, because there is one mindset that is all about me first and America first, and to hell with everybody else. And at the same time, there were just as many people working very hard to counter that and help other people. So who will win this battle in the long run? I think cooperation will win in the long run, and collaboration will win in the long run. As a species, our long-term survival has depended on that.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. Always look for the helpers.
Yes, and you'll find them, you know. So I met people who were, when things had eased in China and manufacturing and supply chains and supply lines opened up again, they were importing through families and networks of friends, they were bringing PPE into this country when the hospitals couldn't get them. But people used their friends and family and supply lines in China to get PPE in and supply them to hospitals and doctors.
And that kind of gives me hope. I think we need to maintain hope for humanity. You've got 2 daughters, and they're doing interesting things. You see the young people. What do you see of them taking on this sort of collaboration and open economy sort of approach?
I'm not sure that my daughters are particularly shining examples of altruism. Sorry, girls. I mean, I think they have their own pressures, but they have shown solidarity with the Black Lives Matter protests. They're very much of a generation that does not buy into these old systems of privilege. They see what's wrong in the world. They see injustice, and they work hard at addressing those things. And they're very aware of their privilege and how they can also, make sure other people get a fair go. I mean, I don't know that just turning up in marches is enough, but I have definitely raised daughters who are revolutionaries, and we'll see what happens for them once they've, gotten through their university education. Yola's in France. She was basically locked up throughout most of COVID. The lockdown in France was very, very strict. So they weren't allowed to even go out for a jog or anything like that. And now she's working in a very small country village where there's not even a coffee shop. There's not a bar, there's not a coffee shop. There's like no commercial activity. And I spoke to her today, and she said, well, the grocer, who's a traveling grocer and it comes once a week, has now gone on vacation, and so now there's no food that comes to the village. They've got to go somewhere to buy it. So I sort of think, I mean, it's like it's really charming. She loves it. She says, I wish I was here throughout COVID because it feels so free, and it's not like in a big city, and there's space, and you can be outside and outdoors, and people help one another very much so. It's the country way of doing things. It wasn't necessarily the case in the city where they lived. I mean, I live in a high-rise building here where the neighbors take care of one another, but in a kind of a New York distant kind of a way. So you would knock on your neighbor every morning, and because my neighbor is 83, and I would just say, just checking if you're still there. And she'd kind of peep through the door and say, yes, I'm still here. Are you okay? And whatever, because people are very afraid of strangers, as, like now stranger danger is real. And, we would send food over and that sort of thing, keep each other a little bit entertained and so on. What about yourselves?
Oh, the lights went out. I've been sitting still too long.
What about yourself? What are you seeing in Sydney and in Australia around, I mean, the COVID has not been so extreme there. It sort of seems to be picking up now, but have you seen collaboration and cooperation? Because all that made the news here was the toilet roll wars.
Which were real. That was not made up nonsense, which I find fascinating in and of itself. Certainly, obviously being part of the startup and the tech community here, yes, there's a ton of collaboration. And what we saw as well was just all the different pockets of the network and the community going, well, here's the bit I can contribute. here's the piece I can, let's have weekly calls, or let's jump on a Zoom chat on a Friday night at 5 p.m. and still have drinks virtually, so we can still feel like the whole normal world is still sort of tangible in some way. And that actually spread to quite a lot of the community across Australia and New Zealand kind of clubbing together as well, which I thought was really lovely. The other thing that I'm really interested in kind of waiting to see whether this happens is you don't have to be in Sydney anymore. You don't have to be in Melbourne. You can be in Toowoomba, or pick any other kind of part of Australia where you don't have to go to the big city anymore to prove yourself. You can do it from where you are. And I think that's a wonderful leveler. There are many challenges for other parts of Australia that are perhaps very remote and rural, and do they have the digital skills and the access to technology to be able to do that? But for a lot of Australia now, you don't have to travel to a main city to go to a demo night. They're all online. You don't have to travel to go to a conference. They're all online. So I do think there's a wonderful kind of democratization of access to great people and great information that's really been quite interesting, and I hope some of that stays.
Well, I was very curious that you know how you network in the real world by going to events. I was thinking, so how's that going to work now? And I figured it out because networking is what I do for a living, and it's core to my role. And so now I thought, okay, so how are we going to work? Because you're in a Zoom conference with 600 people, you can't even see all 600 of them. Mm-hmm. So I figured out the trick. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
All right. So here is the trick: is ask questions in the chat box, and a good moderator will open up an opportunity for the audience to ask questions. And then you ask questions and you see who else is asking questions. And while they're asking questions, you quickly go on LinkedIn and you check them out. Mm-hmm. And then you send them a direct message in the Zoom call to say, oh, I see you're also interested in this, and I'm looking for an expert in that, etc. And so I've actually made new friends through networking, through Zoom calls.
That is excellent advice. Thank you for that.
Yes. So it's all about standing out. And to some degree, the same thing happens when you're at an event and let's say you stand up and you ask a question. Afterwards, at coffee or something, people will say, oh, I loved your question. And, that's an opportunity to, start a conversation. Or you'll say to somebody else, I loved your question. I had the same question. So it's a natural way for people to connect with one another. So Zoom does allow that.
I think that is a really good place to end now. Thank you very much, Annalie. Thanks, Annie. And please like or subscribe to our podcast, and see you next time.
Thank you